Devon's voice carried to her on the breeze. She turned and glanced back at him, wiggling her eyebrows, then venturing forward once again. His groan floated up to her along with the birds chirping and the swishing of the grass against his summer coat. How much farther? She stopped in her tracks and swung her long red braid over her shoulder as she swirled to face him. Narrowing her eyes, she placed her hands on her hips. You should know better than to ask that question. As the one toting all your stuff again, I think it's perfectly within my rights to ask just such a question. He set the bag down and mimicked her posture. That bag gets heavier every time we go anywhere. I'm beginning to think you do it on purpose. A gentleman always carries a lady's things. Her chin lifted with the taunt. Which I have done and will continue to do. But what did you put in there? An anvil? Her lips parted ever so slightly, as she did her best to suppress her grin. His annoyance wasn't real. I have no need for an anvil, Devon Schmidt, so why would I do such a thing? She clasped her hands in front of her and put on her most innocent look. His eyebrows raised and he stared her down. The challenge in his eyes was as plain as the grassy knoll underneath her feet. Fine. She broke eye contact, lifted her hands upward, and let out an unladylike grunt. Good thing Grandmama wasn't present to hear that. You just have to spoil the surprise, don't you? We're almost there. With that, she turned on her heel, knowing full well that he would pick up the bag and follow. He always did. Their path took an incline up a rocky hill, and she focused on her steps so she wouldn't trip and fall back into Devon. Making him tumble backward with her bag of goodies wouldn't be a nice thing to do, and he might refuse to come with her next time. Huffing and puffing at the top of the hill, she waited for him to join her and then grabbed his hand. You're going to love this. Just wait. Thrills zipped up and down her spine as she imagined his face when they accomplished their task. This was what made her feel alive, even if she was about to have them knee-deep in muck. As she dragged him toward her surprise, she swallowed back the sorrow that threatened to overwhelm her every time her thoughts went to the future. He'd be off to university before too long, and these days of dashing off together to explore would come to an end. She blinked several times and forced the reminder to the back of her mind. Look! She pointed toward the drying creek bed. He squinted. Leaning forward, his eyes narrowed even more. It was almost comical how hard he tried. She watched and bit her lip. Over the years, he'd gotten better at seeing what she saw, but most of the time his guesses were incorrect. Is it a fossil? Look who has gotten so smart. She let the sarcastic words drip from her mouth and then smacked his arm with a playful swat. Of course it's a fossil, silly. Don't you see the shape? He studied it for a moment longer. You're the expert when it comes to this. I'm afraid I don't see anything specific jumping out at me. It's clearly a baby alligator, Devon. Come on! She raced toward the small fossil peeking out of its hiding place. An alligator. Clearly. In Pennsylvania, where we have alligators around every corner. She just laughed and led him down to the trench. The afternoon passed with them digging through all the mud and dirt that surrounded the rock and fossilized layer. The time was filled with their shared excitement for subjects his father had promised to cover this term, laughter over how much mud covered them both, and the discovery that her fossil was exactly what she thought. It wasn't the full skeleton, but the skull was enough to keep her smiling. She'd have several months of contentment working on retrieving the fossilized bones.